The princess fled the burning palace, carrying the last royal babies. The palace, once a symbol of elegance and human ingenuity, now shuddered under the assault of a mechanized alien army. Smoke and sparks filled the corridors, and the sound of metal clashing against metal echoed through the great halls. Princess Alara ran as fast as her legs could carry her, clutching the small, fragile forms of the last royal babies to her chest. Their tiny limbs kicked weakly, unaware of the danger surrounding them. Her breath came in harsh, ragged gasps, but she did not stop. She could not stop. Humanity's future rested in her arms. The palace had always been a place of wonder. Its walls were lined with paintings of generations past, tapestries depicting victories and alliances, and sculptures carved from rare metals that seemed to capture the light of the sun itself. Now flames licked the corners of the rooms, and the once majestic corridors were filled with smoke so thick it burned her eyes. The invaders were relentless, creatures of strange shapes and metal bodies, moving with precision and intelligence far beyond anything she had seen. They were not human. They had no mercy. Alara stumbled over debris, her skirts catching on broken furniture, and cursed under her breath. She had trained her whole life to be ready for emergencies, to be smart, quick, and strategic, but nothing could have prepared her for this. The alarms had sounded hours ago, giving the palace little time to react. The royal guards had fought bravely, but they were no match for the invaders' advanced technology. In the chaos, she had grabbed the infants from the royal nursery, the last hope for the human bloodline that could carry the kingdom forward. Her mind raced as she made her way toward a hidden corridor known only to the royal family. This secret path had been built centuries ago for moments exactly like this: escape, survival, preservation. Every step she took was measured, every sound analyzed. She could hear the alien patrols moving through the palace, their mechanical voices calling out in a language she did not understand. A part of her wanted to scream, to beg for them to leave, but she swallowed the fear. Fear would not save her. Only speed, wits, and determination could. The corridor twisted and turned, dark and narrow, with the faint smell of damp stone and ancient oils. Alara moved silently, her fingers brushing along the cool walls for guidance. She paused at every corner, listening for the faintest hint of pursuit. She imagined the little ones in her arms, their soft breathing, their tiny hands curling around her fingers. They were so innocent, so fragile. And yet they carried the weight of the future on their tiny shoulders. If she failed, the human race would lose everything. Outside, the palace courtyard was a scene of devastation. Fires burned where gardens once bloomed, and the alien machines moved in formations that were impossible to predict. Alara's father, the late king, had often spoken of humanity's resilience, how humans could endure when faced with overwhelming odds. She clung to those words now, repeating them in her mind like a mantra. She would endure, she would survive, she would protect these children at all costs. As she reached the end of the tunnel, a faint light broke through the darkness. She emerged into the palace's outer grounds, the night air cool against her sweat-dampened skin. The moon hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the ruined gardens. Smoke curled in the air, and the scent of burning wood and stone filled her nose. Every shadow seemed to move, every sound a threat. She could not stop here. The forest beyond the palace walls beckoned, a dense stretch of ancient trees rumored to hide resistance fighters, those few humans still free from the alien grasp. Alara moved with purpose, slipping between broken statues and shattered fountains, using every shadow as cover. Her heart pounded not only from exertion, but from the constant awareness that death could be just a step behind her. The infant stirred in her arms, fussing softly, and she whispered reassurances she did not entirely believe. "We'll be safe soon. We'll be safe." The words were a promise and a prayer, an acknowledgement that hope was the only weapon she had left. The forest was thick and dark, the trees looming overhead like ancient guardians. She pressed forward, branches scratching her arms and face, mud clinging to her skirts. Her muscles ached, her lungs burned, but she did not stop. Every time she thought she could not go further, she imagined the faces of the humans who had been lost that day, the guards, the servants, her family, and she ran faster. Her determination became a shield, an invisible force that pushed her through exhaustion and fear. Hours passed, or perhaps only minutes. Time seemed meaningless in the forest. She used every skill she had learned: silent steps, quick thinking, and careful observation. She avoided natural traps and set small diversions, hoping to mislead any patrols following her. Every now and then she paused to listen, the babies resting against her chest, their small breaths steadying her own. She realized that these infants were not just children, they were symbols. Symbols of resilience, of hope, of humanity itself. And that realization made her step lighter, her resolve stronger. At one point, she came across a small stream. The water reflected the dim light of the moon, shimmering like silver in the darkness. She knelt briefly, letting the infants drink from the makeshift protective pods she had prepared, and quenched her own thirst. In that brief moment of peace, she allowed herself to feel a flicker of relief. She was still alive. The children were still alive. And though the world had changed forever, there was still a chance. Alara's mind wandered to the stories she had been told as a child, the tales of human ingenuity and bravery, of ordinary people who rose to extraordinary challenges. She thought of the engineers who had built the palace, the soldiers who had defended it, and the countless generations who had fought to keep humanity alive. They had all contributed to this moment in ways large and small, and now it was her turn. She was no longer just a princess. She was a protector, a guardian of a future yet unwritten. As dawn approached, she reached the edge of the forest and looked back at the smoldering ruins of the palace. The fire had consumed everything she knew, but the rising sun cast a new light on the horizon. She could feel a new strength rising within her, fueled by desperation, hope, and the unyielding human spirit. The journey ahead would be long and dangerous, filled with unknown threats, but she would face it head-on. She had no choice. The fate of humanity rested on her shoulders. Through the next few days, Alara moved steadily, taking shelter where she could, finding food and avoiding patrols. The forest was alive with sounds, some of comfort, some of danger. Every encounter, every challenge, reminded her that humans were capable of more than anyone, alien or otherwise, could imagine. She encountered small groups of survivors, some hidden in caves, others moving silently through the trees. They looked to her with a mixture of awe and desperation, understanding immediately the significance of the royal baby she carried. Word of the princess traveling with the last heirs spread quietly, like a secret that gave people strength. Rumors of her journey reached other hidden survivors, and in hushed whispers, hope began to flicker again. Humans had been driven to the edge, but they were not broken. And at the center of this fragile resurgence was Alara, running tirelessly through the forest, her determination unwavering. Even as exhaustion threatened to overtake her, she pressed on. She faced storms, wild animals, and treacherous terrain, each obstacle testing her limits. And yet, every time she faltered, she remembered the tiny lives in her arms, and she moved forward. Her courage inspired those she met, and slowly she began to see the power of human determination, not in weapons or technology, but in willpower, ingenuity, and the drive to survive against impossible odds. By the time she reached the outskirts of the forest, the sun was high in the sky. She looked down at the infants, their small faces peaceful despite the turmoil around them. She allowed herself a rare moment of hope, realizing that the future was not yet lost. Humanity had suffered, yes, but it had also endured. And with her guidance, with her courage, there was a chance to reclaim what had been taken. Alara knew the journey ahead would be even more perilous. Beyond the forest lay the remnants of her kingdom, still under alien control, and the resistance was scattered and weak. But she would not waver. She had survived the fall of the palace, outsmarted the alien patrols, and protected the last royal babies. That was proof enough that humans could endure, adapt, and fight back. Her story, and the story of these children, was only just beginning. And so, with the sun rising behind her and the forest stretching endlessly ahead, Princess Alara moved forward. Each step was heavy with responsibility, yet light with purpose. The world was dangerous, unpredictable, and full of enemies, but it was still theirs. Humanity still had a chance. And as long as she breathed, as long as she ran, the future of humanity would continue. The forest stretched endlessly before Princess Alara, a living maze of towering trees, twisting roots and shadows that shifted with every gust of wind. Her arms ached from holding the royal babies, their fragile bodies nestled against her chest, yet she did not falter. Every step was measured, every sound analyzed. She knew the alien forces that had destroyed her palace were relentless. They were creatures of cold logic and precision, tracking life with methods humans could not easily detect. Yet she had something they could not understand: human ingenuity and unyielding will. She moved carefully, her boots sinking into the soft earth as she navigated around fallen logs and hidden streams. The infants cooed softly, a faint comfort in the oppressive darkness of the forest. Alara's mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. She considered the palace, now nothing more than smoldering ruins, the halls echoing with the last moments of her family. She thought of her father, the late king, whose words now felt more alive than ever. Humanity endures when we refuse to give in. She clung to those words like a lifeline. As night fell, the forest became more threatening. Shadows seemed to take shape and distant sounds made her flinch. Small animals scuttled through the underbrush, some curious, some dangerous. Alara was forced to make quick decisions, pausing to listen, to hide, and to move silently. She found a small clearing near a stream and crouched, allowing the infants to drink from the makeshift protective pods she had fashioned from materials scavenged along the way. She whispered softly to them, her voice a balm against the fear that gripped her own heart. She knew that staying in one place for too long was dangerous. Alien drones were said to be capable of sensing life signs, moving with terrifying accuracy. To rest, even for a moment, meant risking detection. She fed herself only what she could find: berries, roots, and whatever water was clean enough to drink. Her body ached, exhaustion clawed at her mind, but she forced herself onward. Every hardship was a reminder that she was human and that humans could endure. During the first days of travel, Alara encountered other survivors. Small groups, scattered and wary, hid in caves or behind dense foliage. They were shocked to see her with the royal babies, their eyes widening with recognition and hope. Whispers spread quietly among them. The princess carries the last heirs. In these fleeting interactions, Alara found strength. She saw reflected in their faces what she had known all along. Humans could endure unimaginable odds if they had hope and a leader to follow. One night, while resting under the thick canopy, she noticed glowing lights flickering between the trees. At first, she thought they were alien patrols, but as she moved closer, she realized they were signals, simple, human-made lights placed to guide travelers. She followed the path carefully, her mind racing with possibilities. Whoever had left these markers might be part of the resistance, humans still fighting in secret. Perhaps they could provide shelter, food, and guidance. Perhaps they could offer a chance to strike back at the invaders. The path led her to a hidden encampment, small but well-organized. Tents blended into the forest, and lookouts kept watch from high branches. Resistance fighters moved quietly, armed not with advanced alien technology, but with clever devices and tools repurposed from what remained of human civilization. When they saw Alara with the royal babies, their faces lit up with awe and determination. She was no longer just a fleeing princess. She was a beacon of hope. Alara was welcomed cautiously, the leaders assessing her abilities, her knowledge, and her determination. She shared what she knew about the palace, the security systems, and the patterns of the alien army. Every detail mattered. The resistance leaders realized that with her knowledge, they could begin planning counterattacks, sabotage missions, and ways to reclaim lost territory. Alara listened to their strategies and began contributing ideas of her own. She was young, but she had been trained to think like a leader. Days passed in the camp, each one a mix of preparation and survival. Alara helped organize patrols, instructed survivors on tactics, and found herself learning new forms of guerrilla warfare. She observed the alien patterns and noticed how they underestimated humans, assuming fear would dominate. They did not understand the human ability to adapt, to think creatively, to endure when every instinct screamed to surrender. Every small success in the forest reinforced her belief that humans were far from powerless. At night, Alara would sit by a fire, watching the infants sleep in protective pods lined with soft cloths. She whispered stories to them, not stories of fear or loss, but stories of courage, ingenuity, and the triumphs of humanity. She hoped that one day, when they were old enough, these stories would inspire them to carry on the legacy of their people. These children were not just heirs to a kingdom, they were symbols of a species that refused to be extinguished. One morning, the resistance leaders gathered around a rough map of the region. Alara pointed to the palace ruins. "We cannot let the invaders believe this kingdom is finished," she said. "We need to strike back, but carefully. We need to show them that humans are unpredictable, that we are clever, brave, and willing to fight for every inch of our home." The leaders nodded. Together, they devised a plan. Small teams would use knowledge of the terrain to ambush alien patrols, disrupt supply lines, and reclaim strategic locations. Alara suggested using natural features, cliffs, rivers, and dense thickets to their advantage. The resistance engineers began creating traps, diversions, and improvised weapons. Every day, their confidence grew, inspired by Alara's determination and the symbol of the royal infants. As the days turned into weeks, the princess became more than a leader. She became a legend among the survivors. Her courage inspired them to endure hunger, storms, and fatigue. Each small victory against the alien scouts strengthened their morale. She showed that survival was not just about hiding. It was about using every resource, every skill, and every ounce of ingenuity to reclaim what was lost. One afternoon, while scouting a narrow valley, Alara noticed signs of alien activity, strange footprints, the hum of distant machines, and the faint glow of patrol lights. She realized they were getting closer, sensing the presence of humans in the forest. Her pulse quickened, but she forced herself to remain calm. Panic would be deadly. She led the survivors in setting traps along the valley, using fallen trees, camouflaged pits, and noisemakers to create confusion. When the aliens arrived, they were met not with fear but with clever resistance. Small explosions echoed, metal screeched, and the patrols were thrown into chaos. Alara watched from above, her heart pounding, knowing humans had once again outwitted a superior force. The victory was small but significant. It proved that the alien army could be challenged, that humans were not helpless. The infants, nestled in their pods, remained safe throughout the encounter, a constant reminder of what was at stake. Alara realized that every action, every decision, every moment of courage mattered. Survival was not about fleeing alone. It was about inspiring others to rise, to fight, and to endure. As night fell again, the forest seemed less threatening. Fires burned in the distance, marking the location of the survivors' camps, and the sounds of nature blended with the quiet hum of human activity. Alara allowed herself a moment of reflection. She thought of the palace, now lost, and of the countless people who had perished. And yet she also thought of the infants, the survivors, and the human spirit that refused to bow to fear. Humanity had been tested, and though the road ahead was long and uncertain, hope had not been extinguished. Alara knew the journey was far from over. Beyond the forest lay the remnants of human civilization, still struggling under alien occupation. The resistance was growing, but it was scattered, weak, and desperate. Yet she had seen the power of ingenuity, courage, and determination. Humans were not just survivors. They were fighters, thinkers, and dreamers capable of defying impossible odds. And she, a young princess carrying the last royal babies, would lead them toward a future worth fighting for. The next days were a blur of movement, planning, and survival. Alara guided small teams on scouting missions, learning every path, stream, and hidden cave. She trained herself to read the forest as if it were a map of threats and opportunities. Every encounter with the alien forces, every narrow escape, reinforced her belief that humans were more resourceful than any machine. And with each passing day, the infants grew stronger, their lives preserved through the determination of one young woman who refused to let hope die. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, painting the forest in gold and shadow, Alara stood at a high ridge, looking over the expanse of green. The world was vast, dangerous, and uncertain, but it was still alive. Somewhere out there, other survivors waited, inspired by stories of her courage. And somewhere beyond that, the alien forces would underestimate humans once more, just as they always had. She held the royal babies close, feeling their warmth and vulnerability. She whispered a promise to them, soft but unwavering. "I will protect you, I will lead you, and together we will show the universe what humans are capable of." It was more than a vow, it was a declaration. She was no longer just a fleeing princess. She was the guardian of humanity's future. And nothing, not fire, not machines, not fear itself, could stop her from carrying out her mission. The forest stretched endlessly ahead, filled with dangers yet unseen, challenges yet unmet, and victories yet won. But Princess Alara moved forward, step by step, heart pounding, mind sharp, and spirit unbreakable. She was human, and humans endured. She carried the last royal babies, the hope of a kingdom, and the determination of a species that refused to die quietly. And as long as she ran, thought, and fought, the story of humanity's resilience would continue, spreading like a quiet flame ready to ignite into a blazing force. Princess Alara stood at the edge of the hidden encampment, the last royal babies secure in protective pods beside her. The forest around them whispered with life, but she was no longer the same frightened girl who had fled the burning palace. She had become a symbol, a rallying point for the scattered resistance fighters who now looked to her for leadership, courage, and hope. The camp was small but organized. Tents were hidden beneath thick foliage, with watchtowers constructed from fallen trees and rope ladders. Fires burned low, providing warmth and light without attracting undue attention. Humans moved quietly, alert and ready, carrying weapons cobbled together from old technology, scavenged parts, and ingenuity. The alien invaders had destroyed much of humanity's advanced technology, but what remained in these hands was more dangerous than brute force. It was cleverness, adaptability, and determination. Alara met with the leaders of the resistance, former generals, engineers, and strategists who had survived the initial assault on the kingdom. They had been waiting for a spark, someone to guide them and inspire them. Now, standing before them with the royal infants at her side, that spark had arrived. She shared what she knew about the palace, its secret corridors, and the weaknesses in the alien army's approach. She described patrol patterns, surveillance strategies, and even weaknesses in the alien drones, sensors that she had observed during her flight through the forest. Every detail mattered, every bit of information a potential advantage. The leaders listened carefully, nodding, taking notes, and asking questions. Alara was young, yes, but she had seen the enemy firsthand, had navigated through danger, and had protected what was most important. That experience gave her insight and authority. She did not just speak, she demonstrated understanding, courage, and clarity. The resistance members realized that she was more than a symbol, she was a strategist and a fighter in her own right. The first days in the camp were filled with preparation. Alara helped organize scouts to patrol the surrounding forest, learning every hidden path and potential escape route. She instructed survivors on how to move silently, how to use traps to create confusion, and how to use the forest itself as an ally. The alien invaders had advanced weapons and armor, but they were predictable in their reliance on logic. Humans, however, thrived on unpredictability. Alara emphasized this point constantly. Humans were not machines. Humans could adapt, deceive, and endure. While the infant slept safely, Alara worked tirelessly. She mapped the surrounding area, marking vantage points, chokeholds, and supply lines. Engineers crafted improvised weapons from salvaged materials, traps that could disable alien machinery, projectiles that could disrupt sensors, and camouflage devices that could hide humans from the advanced surveillance technology. Every day, the camp grew stronger, more organized, and more confident. And every day, Alara reminded them of what they were fighting for: the survival of humanity, the future of a kingdom, and the promise carried in the tiny lives of the royal babies. During one evening meeting, she stood before the resistance leaders and laid out a bold plan. "We cannot wait for the enemy to weaken us," she said. "We must strike smart, not recklessly. Small teams, using the forest and our knowledge of the terrain, can disrupt their operations. We can reclaim key positions in the city, restore hope, and prove to humanity, and to them, that we are not defeated." The leaders were skeptical at first. The alien forces were powerful, relentless, and seemingly unstoppable. But when Alara described specific strategies, highlighting the weaknesses she had observed and the strengths of the human fighters, they began to see the possibility. She spoke of ambushes, diversions, and psychological tactics that leveraged fear, unpredictability, and speed. She emphasized coordination, patience, and careful observation. Most importantly, she emphasized courage, the kind of courage that had carried her through the forest with the royal babies in her arms. The first operation came sooner than expected. A small patrol of alien drones had ventured near the forest edge, scanning for survivors. Alara led a team of resistance fighters in a carefully orchestrated ambush. Using the terrain, traps, and noise diversion, they lured the drones into a trap. Explosions and mechanical screeches echoed through the forest, and when the smoke cleared, the drones were incapacitated. The victory was small, but it sent a powerful message. Humans could fight back, even against machines designed to hunt them without mercy. Alara watched the fighters celebrate briefly, their morale bolstered. She allowed herself a small smile but reminded them that this was just the beginning. Every encounter taught lessons, every victory built confidence, and every failure was an opportunity to improve. The infants stirred in their pods nearby, unaware that their very existence was motivating the survival of an entire species. As days turned into weeks, Alara became deeply involved in training the resistance. She worked alongside former soldiers, engineers, and ordinary citizens, teaching them how to combine stealth, cleverness, and human adaptability to counter the aliens' technology. She emphasized that humans were unpredictable, that their greatest weapon was their mind and spirit, and that even when outnumbered, they could turn the tide through ingenuity. The infants became a symbol, quietly watched by every member of the camp. Every smile, every coo reminded the survivors of why they fought. They were not just defending territory, they were defending the future. Alara took her responsibility seriously. Each night she checked on them, whispered stories of courage and survival, and envisioned the day they would inherit a safe world. In these moments, she drew strength, knowing that their survival was both her mission and her inspiration. One morning, a scout returned with urgent news. Alien patrols had increased near the edges of the forest. The enemies were adapting, becoming more cautious, more relentless. Alara knew that patience was key. A direct confrontation would be suicide, but careful strategy could turn the situation to their advantage. She gathered the resistance leaders and laid out a plan. They would create controlled disruptions, striking quickly and retreating before the aliens could respond fully. By forcing the invaders to chase shadows, humans could regain control, disrupt supply lines, and reclaim portions of the city gradually. The first major operation was planned with precision. Teams would strike simultaneously in multiple locations, disabling communication nodes, sabotaging supply convoys, and creating diversions to draw alien forces away from critical zones. Alara herself led one team, moving with stealth through the forest toward a supply route known to the aliens but vulnerable to clever traps. Every decision she made balanced risk and reward. Failure could cost lives, but success would strengthen the resistance and give humanity a foothold to rebuild. The operation unfolded with tense precision. Explosions rocked the forest as traps were triggered, alarms echoed in the distance, and the alien forces scrambled to respond. Alara's team moved swiftly, capturing valuable resources and gathering intelligence about enemy movements. The infants, safely hidden in the camp under the care of trusted guards, remained unaware of the chaos unfolding miles away. Yet every successful maneuver reinforced the core truth she had been proving since the fall of the palace. Humans were resourceful, determined, and unstoppable when united by hope. The next weeks were filled with constant activity. Alara rotated between leading missions, training fighters, and planning for the larger goal, reclaiming the palace. Every encounter with alien patrols provided new insights into their tactics and vulnerabilities. Resistance members grew more skilled, confident, and daring. The babies grew too, their cries a reminder of the fragile future they were defending. Each step forward, each small victory, carried humanity closer to survival and eventual triumph. One evening, as the sun set in brilliant streaks of gold and red, Alara gathered the resistance. "We have endured, we have adapted, and we have grown stronger," she said, her voice steady and firm. "The aliens may believe they have won, but they do not understand humans. They do not understand our courage, our creativity, or our will to survive. We will reclaim our home, and we will do it together." Her words resonated through the camp, igniting determination and courage in every heart. Alara spent that night planning, drawing maps, and reviewing strategies with her closest allies. She knew the coming battles would test every skill, every ounce of strength, and every human instinct. But she also knew they were ready. Humans had endured the fall of the palace, the loss of technology, and the terror of an alien invasion. They had survived in the wild, adapted to every obstacle, and now, under her guidance, they would fight back with strategy, courage, and ingenuity. The princess gazed at the royal infants, their tiny faces peaceful in the dim light of the camp. She whispered to them softly, her words carrying hope, promise, and determination. "You will grow up in a world we will reclaim. You will inherit a kingdom built on courage, ingenuity, and survival. And one day, you will carry forward the story of humanity's greatest strength, our refusal to give up, even when all seems lost." As she settled near the fire, reviewing maps and preparing for the next mission, Alara realized that her journey had transformed her. She was no longer just a fleeing princess. She was a leader, a strategist, and the guardian of humanity's future. The forest, the infants, and the resistance fighters around her were all pieces of a greater plan. A plan to reclaim the kingdom, restore hope, and prove that humans, no matter how threatened, could endure and triumph. The path ahead was perilous, filled with alien patrols, traps, and uncertainties. But Princess Ilara was ready. She had learned the forest, trained her people, and proven that humans could survive against impossible odds. And as long as she carried the royal infants, humanity had a symbol, a hope, and a future worth fighting for. The story of survival, courage, and ingenuity was unfolding with every step, every decision, and every battle yet to come. The forest around her was quiet now, but she knew it would not remain so for long. The aliens were adapting, learning, and seeking to crush any signs of human resistance. Yet, for every step they took to dominate, humans took two to survive, adapt, and strike back. Princess Ilara was at the center of it all, leading with heart, mind, and courage, carrying the last royal babies, symbols of a future that refused to die. The first light of dawn painted the horizon in shades of red and gold as Princess Ilara stood on the ridge overlooking the ruins of her palace. Smoke still curled into the sky from the destruction, a reminder of the horrors that had befallen her people. But the fire in her eyes burned brighter than the flames below. The last royal babies, safe in their protective pods, were beside her, a living symbol of humanity's future. Today, she would lead the resistance in a battle to reclaim their home. The human fighters were gathered behind her, moving quietly, with a mixture of nervous energy and fierce determination. They were not soldiers in the traditional sense. Most were ordinary people who had learned to survive in a world that had been stripped of safety and comfort. Yet they had been trained, guided, and inspired by Ilara, who had shown them that humans could outthink, outmaneuver, and endure even the most technologically advanced foes. They were ready. Ilara surveyed the terrain, memorizing every ridge, crag, and alley that could serve as an advantage. The alien forces had fortified the palace ruins, but they relied on predictable patterns, heavy machinery, and a sense of superiority that humans could exploit. She reviewed the plans with her lieutenants, assigning teams to key positions, setting traps, and coordinating signals for communication. Every move had to be precise, every action deliberate. There would be no room for mistakes. The operation began at first light. Small teams slipped through the forests and abandoned streets, striking swiftly and disappearing into shadows. Explosions and smoke served as distractions while others disabled alien supply lines, forcing the invaders to scatter. Ilara herself led a squad along a hidden route, approaching the palace from a side passage known only to the royal family. Her heart pounded not from fear, but from anticipation. Every step brought them closer to reclaiming their home and proving that humans were not powerless. The first confrontation came unexpectedly. Alien patrols, larger and more heavily armed than anticipated, blocked their path. Ilara signaled the team, and they moved with precision, luring the patrol into a narrow alley lined with hidden traps. Mechanical screeches filled the air as the aliens triggered improvised devices that disabled their sensors and immobilized their movement. The humans moved with efficiency, taking advantage of the confusion to push forward. Every small victory reinforced the truth Ilara had lived by since fleeing the palace. Humans could endure, adapt, and overcome when faced with impossible odds. As they advanced, civilians who had survived the invasion began to emerge from hiding. Seeing the princess and the fighters filled them with courage, and they joined in, creating chaos among the alien forces. It was not just a battle of strength or technology. It was a battle of will, ingenuity, and determination. Ilara's squad moved through the city streets, coordinating with other teams, using the terrain, and leveraging every advantage they could find. The palace, though scarred, was still theirs to reclaim. Within the central courtyard, the alien commander awaited, a towering figure of metal and energy. It had no understanding of human emotion or unpredictability. Ilara approached carefully, signaling her team to surround it. They used every tactic they had practiced, traps, diversions, and cunning strategies to weaken the alien leader. The commander lashed out, but human creativity proved superior to raw power. Using improvised devices and coordinated attacks, they disabled its core systems, and with a final strike, the alien commander fell. Alara moved swiftly to secure the palace interior, clearing rooms and corridors of remaining patrols. Each step forward was a triumph, a testament to human resilience and the refusal to surrender. The survivors of her kingdom began to reclaim their homes, inspired by the courage of the princess and her fighters. She paused in the grand hall, the same space that had once been her home, now battered and scarred, yet still standing. She looked down at the royal babies, who slept peacefully despite the chaos, and felt a surge of pride and relief. They were alive, and their kingdom would live through them. As the day progressed, the humans worked tirelessly to fortify the palace, tending to the wounded, gathering supplies, and organizing defenses. Alara oversaw every detail, ensuring that the reclaimed stronghold would be secure against any future attacks. She walked among the survivors, offering encouragement, advice, and guidance. Each smile, each nod, each moment of courage reminded her that humanity's greatest strength was not technology or firepower, but the indomitable human spirit. By evening, the city was largely under human control. Fires had been extinguished, patrols neutralized, and communication restored. Alara allowed herself a rare moment to breathe, looking out over the city she had helped save. The palace, though damaged, stood as a symbol of resilience. She thought of the generations before her, the countless humans who had fought, endured, and sacrificed. Their legacy was alive in her hands and in the small, fragile lives of the royal babies. That night, as the camp within the palace walls settled, Alara gathered the survivors and spoke to them. Today, we have shown that humans are not weak. Today, we have shown that even when the world is against us, we endure. This palace, our home, is ours again, not because we are stronger, but because we are clever, brave, and united. We have survived, we have fought, and we will continue to thrive. Her words carried through the halls, filling hearts with renewed hope. The infants slept under protective coverings, their tiny breaths a rhythmic reminder of what had been won. Alara sat beside them, brushing a lock of hair from her forehead and whispering softly, "You will grow up in a world we reclaimed, a world that knows the courage and ingenuity of humans. You are the future, and we will ensure it is safe and strong." She allowed herself a quiet smile, feeling the weight of responsibility lighten for the first time in months. In the following days, Alara oversaw the restoration of essential systems, water, food, and communication networks. The survivors worked together, inspired by her leadership and the successful reclamation of the palace. She trained them to anticipate threats, adapt to challenges, and defend their home with creativity and courage. Every action reinforced the principle she had lived by since fleeing the burning palace. Humans could survive, adapt, and overcome when guided by intelligence, determination, and hope. Alara also worked to strengthen alliances with other resistance groups scattered across the land. Messengers carried word of the victory, spreading hope and inspiring others to rise. The story of the princess who had fled with the royal babies, survived the forest, and led humans to reclaim their home became legend. It was proof that humanity's spirit could not be broken, no matter how overwhelming the threat. The royal babies became symbols as they grew, their presence reminding everyone that the future was worth fighting for. They were educated in the ways of survival, strategy, and leadership, not merely as heirs to a kingdom, but as carriers of a legacy. Alara ensured that they understood the sacrifices made for their survival, the courage shown by ordinary humans, and the ingenuity that had turned the tide against a technologically superior enemy. Months passed, and the palace slowly returned to life. Gardens were replanted, workshops rebuilt, and streets cleared. Humans celebrated small victories, knowing that while the battle had been won, vigilance was necessary. Alara continued to guide them, teaching that endurance, creativity, and courage were more powerful than any weapon. The palace, once a symbol of luxury and power, now stood as a testament to human resilience and the ability to rise from the ashes. Alara often stood on the palace balcony, watching the sun rise over the city. She reflected on her journey, from fleeing the burning palace with the infants in her arms, to leading the resistance, to reclaiming her home. Every challenge, every danger, and every small victory had shaped her into a leader capable of guiding humans through adversity. She knew the future would hold more trials, but she also knew that humans were not easily defeated. The infants, now a little older and learning about the world they had been born into, played nearby under the watchful eyes of guardians trained by Alara herself. She watched them laugh and explore, a stark contrast to the chaos they had survived. Their innocence and vitality were living proof that humanity had endured and would continue to endure. One evening, as the city settled into quiet, Alara walked through the palace halls, reflecting on all that had happened. She passed rooms that had been destroyed and rebuilt, corridors that had been dark and now were lit with life. She thought of the people who had fought, the sacrifices made, and the courage shown. Humanity had faced annihilation and emerged stronger, smarter, and more united. She understood now what her father had meant. Humans endure because we refuse to surrender, even when all seems lost. In the months that followed, Alara focused on preparing the kingdom for the future. Training programs, strategic defenses, and education initiatives ensured that humans would be ready for any challenge. The story of the invasion and the resistance became a legend, passed down to inspire courage and ingenuity in every generation. The royal babies grew surrounded by love, knowledge, and hope, learning not only how to rule but how to lead with courage and wisdom. Alara's leadership became a symbol of humanity's resilience. She had carried the last royal babies through impossible odds, led humans to reclaim their home, and inspired a kingdom to rise from destruction. Every challenge faced, every obstacle overcome, was proof that humans could endure and thrive. She had turned fear into determination, despair into hope, and survival into triumph. As the sun set on the palace, now restored and alive with human activity, Alara looked out across the city with pride. The journey had been long, the battles fierce, but humanity had endured. The last royal babies slept peacefully, unaware of the heroism that had preserved their lives. And as she watched the horizon, she whispered a promise: to protect, to lead, and to ensure that humanity's story of courage, ingenuity, and resilience would continue for generations to come. Princess Alara had fled a burning palace with the last hope of her kingdom in her arms. She had survived the wilds, united a scattered resistance, and led her people to reclaim their home. The journey had tested every skill, every instinct, and every ounce of courage. Yet in the end, humans had prevailed, not through technology, not through brute force, but through creativity, determination, and unbreakable spirit. The legacy of survival, courage, and hope was secured. The future, once fragile and uncertain, now shone brightly, carried forward by the princess and the royal infants, the living symbols of humanity's resilience and triumph. The princess fled the burning palace, carrying the last royal babies.